Rex Arthur here again, and we are happy what has happened in Trinidad and Tobago. They have decriminalized gay sex, so-called buggery, so-called sodomy, so-called, you know, everything you want to call it. And it's good news because Trinidad and Tobago is not just a country, an island. It is a black country, and it is it's very good news because number one, for those people who think that LGBT life is a white man's life, I'm sorry. Trinidad and Tobago have just shown us that it ain't true. It also black people are LGBTQ. In fact, I remember a very interesting story on the internet. I laughed at a friend of mine. The time I used to be very churchy, and I'll talk about my life also in one video, just a short autobiography of who I am. Yes, and the guy, he felt so hurt. He's a Christian also, and he felt so hurt, and a white Christian. He felt so hurt that black people were predisposed to LGBTQ. That was in America because he was an American, and he was wondering, why is it that there are so many LGBTQ black people? And then he said, in fact, he even wondered the trans. In fact, the trans part is what really shocked him. And at that time, I couldn't answer him. Of course, he was writing. But I understood the guy. I think it gave me an understanding that, you see, if the black people in America are a minority, which they are a minority group, but they have a high rate of the LGBTQ persons, then it is a sign that in actual sense it's really something that affects black people. Of course, all races have LGBTQ people, that's a fact, but when you go deeper into the science, you'll find there are certain peoples that are more predisposed to be LGBTQ than others. So I think that was what happened I think that's what happens in America, because like in America, when you study statistics and demographics, you will find that the black people are the minority, but they make up the largest population in the prison industry. I don't want to call it industry. It's so sad, but that's what it's called because it brings money. And so when you see such a statistic, the normal statistic is supposed to be that the majority race makes up the majority in all sectors, even the negative sectors. But in America, it's not the case. So you find the blacks are the minority, but they're the majority in prison. So it tells you there's something wrong. Something is weird. That statistic. So even now, that one of the LGBTQ of that guy I knew, if he's seeing the blacks are minority, but the LGBTQ people who happen to be black, especially the transes, are more than the white, then you will have to understand there is something. Then it means there's something interesting about those people, the black people. And so it's not racism, it's about detailed science where you go deeper and deeper. And even me, I'm on my journey to study LGBTQ persons, even genetically, because I know there are some genes that can be predisposed to be LGBTQ, and there are some people who can be predisposed to be LGBTQ, much as there are LGBTQ people in all races, but there are some who are predisposed a high number. It's just like the twin population. There are tribes in Africa and the world that are predisposed to having twins. Not all tribes, or some tribes have very few chances of getting twins, but there are certain tribes and certain peoples that are highly predisposed to getting twins. And when they did the research, they found the tribes that eat yams and very starchy foods tend to have very many twins, like in Nigeria and parts of East Africa. They eat a lot of starchy foods, and so they have twins. And you see, so that's detailed science. You go deeper, because not everybody, twins are found everywhere in the world, but there are certain places where it is very high, and when it's very high, you study the science behind it. So that's enough of minority majority demographics, blah blah blah. We go back to Trinidad and Tobago. So Trinidad and Tobago, it's a good story because it's a colonized island. It's a colonized people. These are black people that were colonized by the British, and also very many European powers went to colonize them. And they don't need, you see, colonization is not only a political, it is economic, it is also social. And in the social colonization, they superimposed their religion on the black people who already had their religions. Remember, the black slaves went with their religious views, worshipping the Onitsha and all of these West African deities, Ochuku and all of them. They went with them, and that's why they had their systems. But because they were away from the source, they couldn't uphold. Very few African religions have survived in South America and the Caribbean. But in America, they were crushed completely, and just remnants of African religious thought survived. And they survived through music. So that's why you have jazz and even samba. Actually, the deeper you go to South America, the more African the music is. And the deeper the up you go to North America, the less African it is. It only survived rhythm wise because the rhythm stayed. Anyway, one weakness I have, I can talk too much. So that is just about America. We are on Trinidad, and there were black people who were colonized socially, and that includes religion. So they acquired the colonialist religion. So this wiring it affects people's thought process. So now when you come to realize that, oh my, gay people are actually real. This thing is very real. We need to protect these people. And the laws were made by the colonialists didn't even recognize that fact. And so now they have to undo them. Now you're undoing them when you have already told this black person that life is bad, it is not good, and this black person gets so angry, and he's now even fighting his own flesh and blood. Like what I've told you in the other video, there are gays who've been evicted because they are gay in Trinidad and Tobago because of the law. It's the thought process. They have been wired. So you have to deprogram very many minds, And Ngugi wa Thiong'o said, decolonize the mind. I now just say decolonize. I say deprogram. There's a deprogramming that needs to happen because we were programmed. We are all robots. That's my view. We are all robots, and we just take in information. And so that is what happened to African black people. Because if I use African is a geographical term, and there are Arabs who are African, and there are Asians who are African, and there are whites who are African. So it's not a black term. So the so what happened is the black people were colonized in every way, even as I've said, socially, and socially it affected very many things. Clothing, you know, the African tribes never used to wear Western clothing. Cotton was it was not part of life. Even if cotton can grow in Africa, no one thought of it as something to clothe themselves. And you can't blame them because the weather in Africa is okay. You know, you can sunbathe without anything. You know, you topless. If you've watched Shaka Zulu, everyone was topless. They were only covering their private parts. So basically, life was good. It was the only time you could. In fact, it was the royals that used to wear the leopard skin and the cow hides, and it can get cold in South Africa, so that would be the only time you would want to cover up. But other than that, life was bikini everywhere. So that was happening in South Africa. But guess what? When the colonialists came, they gave you, your clothes and told you, do away with that skin. You can wear a shirt, a trouser, a skirt, and that's what happened. And, that's why I always say black people or Africans, but black people now, I think are the most liberal people in the world because they change. They change. They just take things. They just take, today it's this. Oh, okay, I'm going to do it. They take this. No, I'm going to do it. In a span of 100 years, most Africans, their forefathers were walking naked. Their father, the forefather who happens to be, let's go like from 1900, somebody's grandfather was naked. Then his father was wearing clothes and he was a Christian. Then his son is now, he wears a stud. Within 100 years, that change has happened in Africa. But if you look at the Western world, the European world, it's different. The European world, they had a very long lull. They slept for a very long time. Then they woke up in the 17th century with the Renaissance. And that's when things started picking up. But before that, you have a long line of somebody wearing shirts. He wore shirts his forefathers have been wearing shirts for 600 years. They've only known a shirt. But in Africa, it was different. So what I'm trying to say is that Africa has a different scope of life. And we'll talk about that in another video. So as we conclude, this is what happened to Trinidad. These are black people who were colonized. And so they were wired to hate gay people because of the religion.